We are the independents. Last night, we asked John Bolton what he'd do in North Korea if he were president. And we want to pose the same scenario for Ukraine, whose unrest is growing deadlier by the day. Joining us is former Congressman and two-time presidential hopeful, Dr. Ron Paul. Good evening, Dr. Paul.
Good evening. Nice to be with you.
Very good. Well, a lot is happening around the globe, from Syria to Venezuela, and especially in the Ukraine. How would President Paul respond to the uprising?
Which one? You want in Ukraine in particular?
Ukraine. Let's start with the Ukraine.
Okay. I think we should just stay out of it. The Ukrainians have a problem. It's a serious problem. And many Ukrainians take the position that they should be allowed to settle that problem and no foreign government should be involved. Unfortunately, the people who are more powerful in the East, the ones who are more powerful in the West, want help. One seeks the United States to get money and support, and the other one seeks Russia. So it's a mess. But one thing for sure, the only thing we have a control of, and an American president would have control of, is to mind our own business. Unfortunately, we have done exactly the opposite. There was a conversation caught between an Assistant Secretary of State and our ambassador to Ukraine, planning strategy on how to take over the country and who's going to be the leader of the country in the future. That is not good. That's very bad. It won't solve the problems. It'll just dig another quagmire for us, and it won't help the Ukrainians.
And I know you're opposed to nation building, but at some point, do you pick up the phone? When does your version of diplomacy begin?
Well, the phone, I think you should always have diplomacy. Anybody who's willing to talk, we should talk. But that doesn't mean that we should badger, that we shouldn't promise to give away taxpayers' money. We shouldn't threaten with bombing. But to talk to people is quite all right, and I think it should be. I think talking to the Iranians okay. Kennedy talked to Khrushchev in a very critical period in our history. So talking is very good. We should do a lot more. We have thousands of diplomats. I wish we would use a few of them once in a while. So talking is one thing, but getting involved and claiming that we have a moral right and an obligation to settle these disputes. I think that the Ukrainians are obligated to settle their own disputes, just as if we have a dispute in this country, we don't want the Chinese or the Russians or the Europeans coming here and telling us how to settle a dispute in our country or on our borders.
What do you do, even rhetorically, when you have a disproportionate exercise of power? In the case of Russia, all around its periphery, it's been meddling in the affairs of Ukraine right now and has so much more power than Ukraine does. Certainly meddled in the affairs of Georgia and Abkhazia and plenty of places like that. Do you at least use the bully pulpit, or do you criticize them for doing this? What do you do when there's an imbalance of power between two states and one of them is pushing the other one around?
Of course, you could throw that question back to America, because look at how many places you take the Iranians right now. We must have 50 bases around the Iranians and nuclear missiles surrounding them. So, yes, that happens, but I'm just opposed to it because I think it makes it much worse. But for an arguing the case that us being in the Ukraine is identical to the Soviets or the Russians being in Ukraine would be like arguing that if there's a border dispute with Mexico and the Russians are in there agitating, that wouldn't be of greater interest to us than it should be to the Russians. And right now, historically, the Russians are involved, the Europeans are involved, but to let them settle it, why are we going thousands and thousands of miles away looking for a fight and looking for further financing with money we don't have? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't set examples. And if somebody asks us a question about what could be done, I think if somebody says, what's your advice? Well, make two states out of there, have a loose confederation, let the East go East and the West go West, and all of a sudden maybe it would end. I believe that there should be, I believe in self-determination. I believe in small government. And I think the people would believe that way. I bet if you took a poll in East and West, half would want to go one way and half the other way. But it's the leaders, it's the government, it's the special interests, it's the Russian government and the American government that gets in there and agitates for the wrong reason. But just for the people, I believe they could make, a decision for themselves. But I heard just recently somebody speaking from the Ukraine and said, Yes, we have a problem. We can deal with it. The last thing we need is foreign intervention. We'd like the Americans to stay out, and we'd like the Russians to stay out. And, of course, that would be a much better situation. But to say that the Russian involvement there is identical to ours, I don't agree with that because of the analogy I made with Mexico.
Now, Putin's a little busy with the Olympics this week. We'll see what happens next. All right, Dr.